Hi, I'm Michelle Craske from the UCLA Depression Grand Challenge, and I am here with President Santa Ono, the 15th President of the University of British Columbia, or UBC. UCLA recently recognized President Ono as a depression hero for sharing his own personal struggles with the experience of depression with his campus community. And by doing so, President Ono let the students at UBC and elsewhere know that they are not alone and that there is hope. The UCLA Depression Grand Challenge launched the Depression Hero program in commemoration of World Health Day in order to publicly recognize those individuals who share their experience with depression in order to let others know that they're not suffering alone. And I am particularly thrilled to be talking with President Ono because I myself am an alum of UBC. So thank you, President Ono.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to speak with you, and we're very proud of you as an alumnus of UBC.
Thank you. Maybe I can start by asking, was there a certain event or trigger in your life that led you to decide or influenced your decision to talk about your depression openly?
Well, I guess the part of your question which is salient is the part that talks about openly. I had certainly spoken about my struggles with a few very close friends over the years, and I spoke about it with individuals, professionals at my previous university, University of Cincinnati, that are charged with looking after the welfare of students that were suffering from depression and anxiety at that institution. And there was a moment where I was incredibly moved by a situation on that campus where a student went missing for, I think, 8 days. And the entire university community was mobilized to try to find this missing student. And you know, one of the most difficult things as a university president is to actually learn from a phone call that that missing student had taken his own life. And he was a magnificent student. His name was Brogan Dully. And it had become a national news item. In fact, even an international news item that we were looking for this missing student. And when we learned that he had taken his own life, it brought back memories of my own challenges. And I spoke to the counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists at University of Cincinnati after learning about his suicide and revealed that I had tried twice to take my own life as a youngster and as a young adult. And so I spoke to them about it. And the event that really encouraged me to speak even more openly about it was a fundraiser in Cincinnati, Ohio. The organization is called 1N5 or 1 in 5, recognizing that 1 in 5 individuals, and that's conservative, will at some time in their life suffer from anxiety or depression. And it's an organization that was founded by the wife of a former faculty member at the University of Cincinnati. So not a student, but a faculty member, in fact, a very distinguished one. And she was very motivated after her husband's suicide to create a foundation. And it was really focused primarily on addressing the lack of support for youngsters and university students not having sufficient education on how to help each other when they see a peer struggling with depression or anxiety, and that there aren't enough support services in most universities. And also the fact that there's a stigma about speaking about one's mental health challenges. And so I went to this fundraiser, and she asked me to speak, and my part of the agenda followed a testimonial from a local teenager who had ideated about suicide and who had written an autobiography about her struggles. And I was so moved by her openness and her courage in speaking about her suicide attempts that as I listened to her, I was thinking about being similarly brave and open about my own challenges. Another thing happened, and that was that my younger brother, Ken, a very accomplished mathematician, had sent me a PDF of an autobiography he had just written. And I learned for the first time that he, someone who's very accomplished, who graduated from University of Chicago, got his PhD from UCLA, and was lecturing at, I think, the University of Montana, was very, very dispirited about his performance at a seminar. He was driving back and on a rainy day and almost swerved his car into an 18-wheel trailer, truck. And so two things converged in my mind as I was there waiting to speak. One, the inspiration of this teenager having the courage to speak about her challenges and to do something about this really global problem, and my brother's own story. And so I got up there, not planning to do anything, and for the first time I spoke in front of hundreds of individuals about my own challenges and my own suicide attempts. And I was amazed that it became quite a news story almost immediately. I didn't know that very few university presidents talk about their own challenges. So that's what happened.
Yeah, that is amazing. For those of you who are just joining us, I'm Michelle Craske from the UCLA Depression Grand Challenge, speaking here with President Ono from UBC. That's an amazing story and touches on so many different aspects of depression, doesn't it? Just starting with the fact of how vast a problem this is, that it just seems to affect so many individuals. And at the same time, it seems like people are starting to talk about it more now. Do you feel that, or do you see that in the students at UBC, that there's more willingness to share or overcome the shame and stigma associated with depression?
I would say it's a mixture. One of the things that happened this week was that Prince William talked about his own challenges and about Harry after the death of Diana, their mother. And I think he actually had some sort of Facebook live chat with somebody else. I forgot who it is.
Lady Gaga.
That's right, Lady Gaga. And that's really powerful for those two iconic figures to really have that kind of conversation. So I applaud them for doing that. To answer your question, I think that students are becoming more engaged. They're becoming less inhibited about speaking about their challenges. They're actually demanding university administrations to do more, and they're right to demand that. I think that universities are responding one at a time, piecemeal, but that state systems and provinces are also taking it seriously. And I think the more we all speak, the more there will actually be change. So I'm optimistic, but there's much more work to do. I also see a number of students that I know are still suffering, and I worry not only about those that come to me timidly to talk about their challenges. I worry about those that aren't coming to me, the ones that are alone in their halls of residence, the ones that, whether it's their cultural or international perspective, are particularly worried about speaking about their challenges. So there's more work to do, and there's much more education that has to happen, even earlier than university. We need to really look at what we do in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools as well. Absolutely.
I'll just take a moment to encourage those who are viewing us to feel free to submit questions, because we're certainly here to talk. I want to reiterate something that you just mentioned. I know from my own work that elementary school, high school, college, they're all really peak times at which the depression seems to peak and become more of a problem, whether it's related to social peer pressure or academic achievement pressure. Seems like early intervention is definitely a way to go. And yet there's a barrier to that, right? Because it seems the medical systems tend to focus more on treatment rather than prevention.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there's some optimistic points. You know, when President Obama was still in office, he had a White House summit, and I was invited to participate in that. And I was heartened to see the number of support groups and government officials really working together in unison. Really coming together shoulder to shoulder is really necessary to precipitate change. And the good news is that people are really starting to come together, and we need to continue to do so. And I believe that it'll lead to a better place.
And that's right, and that's with the royal family coming out, that's only going to enhance that for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Are you doing anything on the UBC campus at this point on a scale that could help with the large proportion of individuals that you've mentioned?
Well, we are first trying to understand the root causes of the increased incidence of depression and anxiety in our own population, and also looking at data from other universities as well. I can tell you at the University of Cincinnati, as I said, sometimes the students actually will shine a light on the issue. And I was very proud of them because there was one football game on ESPN that was completely sold out. And as you know, there's usually a blimp flying over the stadium, and at nighttime it's particularly dramatic. And the students sit in two different sections of the stadium on either end, in the end zone sections. Yeah. And they wanted to illustrate how serious the problem was, number one, and also two, that there's nothing to be ashamed of because so many people suffer from anxiety and depression. They actually estimated that 40% of the student population there at some time during their university career struggle with depression or anxiety. And so on national television, they had two colors of paper squares. And you know how sometimes the aerial view can illustrate something dramatic. And they distributed these and they held them up. And 40% of the students had a color that indicated that they had suffered or were suffering for anxiety or depression. So that prompted us at Cincinnati to really increase significantly the resources that we have available for education, proactive education, for peer support, to hire more counselors and train psychiatrists, and to make many of those initial visits free of charge, because part of the barrier to seeking help was that perhaps the parents would find out if there was a record of their seeking help. And so that's one thing that we did in Cincinnati. At UBC, we've even taken a bigger step. We're first studying the data and trying to identify at-risk groups. And we've identified, as you know from your own scholarship, that LGBTQ, especially trans adolescents, are particularly at risk for understandable reasons, because of lack of acceptance and some bullying that occurs not only in high schools but also in universities. The other at-risk group is really the international population, and you can segment that even further. So now we're starting to create a heat map of who we should interact with proactively to try to decrease the incidence of anxiety and depression. And so we're doing that kind of analysis, and we've also significantly increased the resources that are available by $2.5 million this year alone. And we're heartened by the fact that just a couple weeks ago, I gave a talk at the Canadian Mental Health Association Summit in downtown Vancouver. There were professionals, student affairs professionals at that, as well as individuals that are part of support organizations. And the province has allocated another $1.5 million to support the university system as well. So, this all comes together to have a positive impact, really.
That's tremendous. That is tremendous. I just want to note that we've had 200 views so far. And,
hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thank you to Margaret, Hannah, and Terry for your likes. May I tell you a little bit about what we're doing at UCLA? Because I think it could overlap a little bit with what you're doing there.
I'd love to hear about it, and I like the fact that you're really taking a bold step in trying to decrease depression on campus by 50%, which is, I really do admire having a target.
Well,
I'd love to learn more.
The UCLA Depression Grand Challenge has indeed taken on this initiative of reducing the burden of depression by 50% by the year 2050. And it came about for the reasons we've talked about, which is we recognize the vast scope of depression, how many people it affects, and the impact it has on people's lives, combined with the realization that we still don't really understand depression. And because we don't really understand it in all of its different forms, we don't have great treatments. We have good treatments, but we don't have the best treatments. And we certainly are not at the level where we can match the treatment to the individual. And so what UCLA has done is taken on this initiative to recruit an enormous number of individuals over a period of 10 years, 100,000 individuals, so that we can really track and identify what are the risks, what are the causes, how can we develop better treatments, and then match those treatments to the fit person's needs. And to that end, we've begun by instituting a screening methodology so that we can screen the student body, as well as eventually patients within the healthcare system, because like UBC, UCLA has a big healthcare system associated with it, and also the staff at UCLA. And then of those who are screened, we can then match them up to different levels of treatment. And using digital methodologies, we're now in a position to be able to provide help for those who have milder levels of depression with internet-based treatments and tools, with trained non-professionals who can support them, and then reserve the more expert clinicians for those who are more severely depressed or suicidal. So we're trying to develop a sort of a scalable model, at the same time retaining all of the effectiveness of what we know to be the best right now. So I think the missions of the two universities are in exact synchrony right now.
You know, I'd like to explore potential inter-university collaborations. As you know, we have tremendous strengths here, as does UCLA, in genomics. And there's a push here on precision health and precision medicine.
Yes,
and,
yeah.
And we, like UCLA, have a great brain health neuroscience institute. So I think, you know, maybe we could collaborate. And, you know, one thing that is really stimulating our collaborations with universities south of the border is actually Microsoft. And yes. Microsoft is actually very interested in health, and through their Azure platform, looking at big data approaches to genomics and precision health. And so offline, you know, we're going to talk about other things, but offline, I'd really like to explore with you how we might collaborate as institutions. And I think that together, it's amazing what UCLA and UBC might do together. We're doing some things with the University of Washington, but it'd be wonderful to collaborate with UCLA.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic too, because one of the things that drew me in particular to the Depression Grand Challenge is that for many years I've studied the risk factors for depression and anxiety and the development of new treatments in my own center, always limited by relatively small samples and not being able to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. Once you're at the level where entire universities are collaborating with people from all different perspectives, from the basic scientist all the way through to the clinical application, then I think there's a way to actually make a big impact and really move the field forward. So that kind of big data collaboration, I think, is a great idea. We have a question from Frank, who's asking, are there certain students more vulnerable to depression than others? I don't know if you want to take a bite at that.
I'd be happy to. And I was alluding to our data-driven analysis of our student population. So first of all, Frank, thank you for that wonderful question. The answer is certainly yes. The data are showing both here and at other campuses that there are certain groups that appear to be more vulnerable. Not to say that there are not students in other groups that are not vulnerable. So they certainly are. But we do see that in terms of satisfaction, happiness, visits to counselors, that there are certain groups, international students and LGBTQ students, trans students, that we have to pay particular attention to. What do you see at UCLA?
So the Similar, very similar findings in terms of the kinds of students, but also broader risk factors that are relevant to the entire population. So early adversity and difficult living situations seems to play a role as well. And one of the goals, of course, of treatment is not necessarily to take away or erase all of that, but develop coping skills to manage those kinds of situations. Yeah. Did you have any backlashes when you came out and talked about depression? Was there any negative after effect from that?
I would say largely no, but I'll talk a little bit about one specific example. If you look back to when I actually opened up about my struggles in a situation in Cincinnati in front of several hundred people, I didn't know that it became almost a global news story.
Right.
It was picked up in the UK and Asia, all over the United States, and I was surprised that one comment in Cincinnati would become almost a global story, and so I was surprised by that, and I was, to be frank, a little worried going to work. Well, how would people treat me? Would they change? Would the board of trustees lose confidence in me? But if anything, there's some people that were a little bit uncomfortable because it's a very personal thing that you share. But I'd say the vast majority of people rallied to my support. That the healthcare professionals said it was something that was needed. I was very, very happy that many groups reached out to me to help them get the word out. I participated in runs, and as I said, I went to the White House Summit, and I've been invited by a university in New Jersey to give a talk to the entire student body about the challenges, but also how working together we can make a positive difference in supporting those in need. And so I was happy about that. I would say, if you look back to what was happening then, it was actually the final stages of the selection for the next president of UBC. So the news came out at the end stages of my negotiation with UBC about moving here. And, part of me was worried about how is this going to impact the search committee's view of me. What I heard back almost instantly was that their collective and individual respect for me had grown, that I was comfortable sharing this and using it really to try to have positive change locally and nationally. So that was positive. The only time where I really got a little bit nervous was that you have health insurance, life insurance, and so I moved to Canada. And of course, since it's all over the internet, it's something that you can no longer hide because you've opened up, talked about it. And as you probably know, life insurance, they look at previous history, medical history. And I had been very open about my having to visit the Shepherd Pratt Hospital in Baltimore and seeing psychologists and taking a medication to manage my depression and anxiety, and it took some time for me to get over my challenges, and so I had to be honest about that as I was being interviewed. They were checking my heart, listening to my heart, but they were also asking me questions because I had revealed the fact that I had attempted suicide twice, and they came back and asked even more questions. So that was probably the closest, in terms of a backlash that had occurred. But I'd say aside from that, in terms of support that I enjoy from the Board of Governors here at UBC, from the students, from the faculty, that I really appreciate the support that I've received here and also in Cincinnati.
That is tremendous, and I think that's a great guideline for setting hope for individuals, because I feel that a lot of people become very worried about sharing their stories for fear of the consequences, for fear of what
Absolutely.
might happen.
I'll say at the end of the day, what happened was that the life insurance company took into account the fact that I've been symptom-free for quite a long time, that they took into account evidence that I have a highly functioning life, at least in their view. And they took all that to account, and they eventually did insure me.
Okay, very good.
So it ended up turning out okay at the end of the day.
I'll just take a moment to note we have now 1,200 views on this, and
hello everybody.
And that just to remind people, I'm Michelle Craske from the UCLA Depression Grand Challenge, chatting with President Ono from UBC. You know, here at UCLA, the student body, like you've mentioned, has become very interested and very involved. And so much so that various subgroups of the population are coming to us saying, how can we do more? How can we help? Whether they're part of a larger organization or just their own independent group of people. We've also had a program of training students in becoming student peers who can lead support groups for those who are undergoing maybe an internet-based psychological treatment. And the interest in that has been tremendous. So I think at the level of the student body, the concern about shame and stigma seems to be probably much less than it was. It may be a generational issue. But knowing from your experience that there's great hope from sharing, I think is a very positive message.
I agree 100%. I find that it's the same in Ohio and in Vancouver. Here at UBC, I meet scores of students that want to talk about it. They want to talk about their friends. They want to do more. They want to raise money. They want to learn about what it is that they can do in terms of peer support. So this generation of students is incredibly empathetic. They inspire me. They motivate me, and I want to support them.
Yeah, no, it's a great time for doing this kind of work. We now have over 2,000 views, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So we have a limited time now to. So let's talk about when you think about the UBC campus, what else do you see might happen as a way of getting students more involved? I mean, for example, this model that I explained here, where we have a scalable treatment for different levels of severity, is that something that might apply, do you think, there, or have you thought of other ways beyond studying it? What might you do to treat it, do you think?
No, I think that we can learn from UCLA. I think that really to pick up on the idea of collaboration, I would like to offline really think about what it is that you're doing, and maybe we could share what we're doing here. So certainly, I think that appears to be a very attractive approach, and I applaud you for doing that. Here at UBC, I think we're doing a lot of thinking. We recently published an article about living, learning communities, and what we can do in terms of training resident advisors and student upper class students for the signs and symptoms of early stages of anxiety or depression, and really what it is that they can do, and at what point it really should be brought to the attention of superiors of healthcare providers, and so I think that's a real opportunity here. I think that student affairs officials, the whole student affairs profession, is very sensitized about the need to do something about the situation, and there are entire segments of their conferences that are devoted to this. So I think that we really need to work with the student affairs representatives on campuses, but also student groups as well. But we need to organize it. I think that that students are very well-meaning, and they're raising money and they want to help. We're not doing a very good job instructing them or advising them or structuring that passion. And I think that that's something, I don't know about UCLA, that's something that we need to work on here at UBC.
One of the things that we were very interested in dealing with is the issue of suicide. As you know yourself, that's a very difficult issue and very tragic when it does happen, and tragic even when people like yourself consider it. And at this point, it's been very hard to predict as a mental health professional when somebody is on that pathway, or how to intervene in enough time to prevent it from happening. And so we've become very interested in what can we do that would provide us sort of clues that would, through, fairly complex algorithms from lots of data coming in about an individual as they function from day to day to day. Are there any clues about a tipping point towards some kind of crisis and the need to intervene early, as opposed to what typically happens, which is the intervention is too late? So they're relying on new technologies, remote monitoring of depression and suicide risk, I think is both an exciting way to go, but also one that could actually transform how we do things.
I agree 100%. And I think that the exciting thing is that we now have student information systems that activate early warning in terms of academic performance. And as you know, in some cases, you can detect the fact that students are not actually coming to class. Yeah. And the laboratory assistant or the teaching assistant recognizes that some students are not coming to class. And in most cases, that's normal because, as you know, some students don't want to go to class, and they're perfectly fine. But still, it's a warning. The other, beyond attendance, the other warning trigger is a precipitous drop in academic performance. So the student that did very well in first year, suddenly in second semester, second year, they've gone from being a 3.5 GPA student to being a 1.6. That's a sign that something's not right. And if you triangulate that data point with maybe in one system that there's a notation from RA that the student hasn't been going to intramurals anymore, and just if you triangulate all of that, I think that's incredibly powerful, and I think technology will allow us to be better in looking for the signs and symptoms early. I think that the other thing is that in too many institutions where there's a sign that a student is dropping in terms of academic performance, when that student is actually in front of the academic advisor, the questions are too one-dimensional. Are you not seeing your professor during office hours? Are you not taking advantage of the online video prior to the course? Can we provide academic assistance? And then the student leaves, and then you find out that the root cause is really depression and anxiety, and that if we can train the academic advisor and the residence advisor, or even the coach, to use the student information system and to ask additional questions, then I think that could be very, very effective. So I'm excited about that potential of big data and systems. Yeah. Sometimes even with all of those different data points, it's perplexing.
It is.
At UBC, there was a medical student that took her own life, a beautiful young woman who was a medical student at UBC. It's incredibly hard to get into medical school at UBC. So obviously a brilliant student who was a very talented ice hockey player. It's not easy to play ice hockey at UBC either. So very talented, had lots of friends, and to most of the people who interacted with her and to her parents, it's perplexing that she took her own life. And it's difficult for the family, it's difficult for the students and the hockey team. And so there are instances, I think, where early warning and better communication and triangulation can help. There's so much more work to be done, I think.
Exactly. I just want to encourage the viewers at this point. We're coming to a close. If you'd like to move your comments to these hosts.
Really moving comments.
Sorry?
People gave us amazing comments.
People gave us amazing comments. These are people like Mashid and David, Freddie, Anna, Justin and Dahlia. It's just that at this point we don't have time to respond to all of the comments. Yeah. Do you have a couple more minutes, President Ono? Because I think we're going over time at this point. Are you okay with a couple more minutes? Or
I'm perfectly okay. I'm perfectly okay. And I was wondering if I could say something really quickly.
Yeah.
And that is, for those of you who are watching, especially if some of you are struggling, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm on the Twitter. My Twitter address at UBC or Z. And let me know if I can be helpful to you or to some kind of cause that you're involved in.
That is tremendous. That is tremendous. And I thank you for that. And I also want to extend the same kind of invitation to people at UCLA, if they are watching, that they can always contact the UCLA Depression Grand Challenge team and find resources, because we're there to help. We have a combination of, a very dedicated group of people from all different disciplines working on this issue, and how do we understand it in all of its complexity, and how do we help people who really are not getting the help that they need. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. This has been really, really a fantastic conversation, and very enlightening for all of those who are suffering, and even those who are not, just to get a handle on what this condition is all about. I'm going to encourage the viewers, if you haven't been able to have your questions answered, to follow us on at UCLA Think Grand, or to email us at grandchallenges@ucla.edu. Watch out for an archived copy of this video, and it can be shared. And we will be announcing our next Depression Hero in the coming weeks with another Facebook Live broadcast, at which time I will join you again. Thank you so much, President Ono, and thank you for everything you have done. You're an amazing role model and a true leader in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Look forward to working together.